Have you ever walked into a place and feel like you don't exist? Not just as a customer, but as a human being. That was today. And the wildest part? She owned the damn place. On a drizzly Seattle afternoon, Amira Blake, a 36-year-old black woman in her third trimester and CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing luxury hotel chains, stepped through the glass doors of the Azure Pearl, an opulent five-star property she personally helped design. No entourage, no press. No one even knew she was coming. She wasn't there to give a speech or cut a ribbon. She was there because too many emails had gone unanswered. Too many complaints had landed on her desk, all pointing to this hotel. Guests being overlooked, service staff making assumptions, and a pattern of subtle but unmistakable discrimination. So today, Amira came in undercover, without warning, to see the truth for herself. Because when you build an empire from the ground up, the last thing you tolerate is rot growing at the foundation. Dressed in a simple maternity dress and oversized sunglasses, Amira Blake blended in like any other tired traveler checking in after a long day. No one gave her a second glance as she approached the front desk. Certainly not the young receptionist, Tiffany, a 26-year-old with platinum blonde hair, a glossy manicure, and a permanent look of boredom etched into her face. Tiffany barely looked up from her phone, thumbs still tapping away at whatever conversation she clearly found more important than the human being standing right in front of her. Amira offered a polite smile and a calm voice. "Hi there," she said gently. "I have a reservation under the name Amira Blake." There was a beat, a lazy glance, and then Tiffany let out a short, dismissive laugh, more like a breath than a sound. "Yeah, nope, nothing under that name. Maybe you booked the wrong hotel." Her tone wasn't just indifferent, it was drenched in something colder. Assumption. Judgment. The kind that came from a split-second calculation based on appearance, skin color, pregnancy, lack of designer labels. Tiffany didn't even glance at the screen, didn't bother double-checking, just rolled her eyes and returned to scrolling, as if Amira had interrupted something vital. Amira blinked, trying to keep her composure. Her hand instinctively moved to the gentle curve of her belly, as if to remind herself to breathe. She wasn't new to this. She'd walked through boardrooms where no one expected her to be the boss, sat in meetings where men assumed she was the assistant. But this hit differently. This wasn't just arrogance, this was erased. Tiffany didn't say it out loud, but the look she gave Amira said everything. People like you don't stay here. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. This wasn't just a hotel, it was her hotel. Every chandelier in the lobby, every marble tile, every thread of the velvet sofas had passed through her approval. She'd flown across 3 states while 7 months pregnant just to personally walk the site during construction. And now she was being told, casually, confidently, that she didn't belong. Amira's mind flickered to the complaints she'd received in recent weeks, reports of guests being dismissed, ignored, or mysteriously unbooked upon arrival. She hadn't wanted to believe it, but now, standing here, treated like a nobody by an employee on her payroll, she knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't a glitch in the system, it was the system, and it had a face, a name tag, a phone in hand and a smirk that said, "I decide who matters." Amira didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply stood still, steadying herself with one hand on the front desk, the other resting protectively on her stomach. This was no longer about a missed reservation, it was about accountability. And the moment she locked eyes with Tiffany, who still hadn't realized who she was speaking to, Amira knew this hotel was about to learn a lesson. Amira calmly pulled up the confirmation email on her phone and held it out. "Here's the reservation," she said, her tone still measured. Tiffany gave it a disinterested glance, shrugged, and didn't even bother reading the details. "The system says you're not in," she said with a smirk, "so maybe try the Hilton down the street. I'm kind of busy with actual guests right now." With that, she flicked her eyes over Amira's shoulder and beamed, actually beamed, as a well-dressed white couple stepped up to the desk behind her. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, so nice to see you again. Your suite is ready. Top floor, as always," Tiffany gushed, her tone switching to syrupy sweet professionalism in an instant. She pulled out 2 key cards with practiced flair and stepped from behind the counter to personally escort them to the elevator, all smiles and laughter. Amira stood frozen, stomach tight, not just from pregnancy, but from the sharp, suffocating sting of being deliberately dismissed. She had just watched her room, her reservation, handed over to someone else without a second thought. And the worst part? The smug little look Tiffany shot her over her shoulder before disappearing down the corridor. That wasn't a glitch, that was a message. Amira took a slow breath, grounding herself. She wasn't going to shout, she wasn't going to beg. Instead, she stepped off to the side, reached into her tote, and pulled out a second phone. This one reserved strictly for executive access. In a few taps, she was inside the hotel's internal management portal, bypassing every layer of staff-level access until she was looking directly at the live reservation logs. Her fingers moved quickly, eyes scanning each entry with growing clarity. There it was, her booking. Room 1802. Confirmed, time-stamped, paid in full, and then just 4 minutes ago, manually deleted. Her heart thudded once in her chest. She clicked into the changelog. The system was airtight. Every action left a digital footprint. Deleted by Tiffany Grant, front desk associate. There was no mistake, no technical hiccup. Tiffany had seen her name and erased it. Just like that. But it didn't stop there. Curious, Amira clicked further into Tiffany's profile. A small window popped up, recent actions. Within the last 30 days alone, Tiffany had manually cancelled 6 reservations, 4 of them under obviously ethnic names. Even worse, internal notes revealed flagged guest complaints. Guest claimed reservation was cancelled without cause. Guest reported staff made racially insensitive remarks. Front desk associate failed to verify ID before cancelling reservation. And each time the associate listed Tiffany Grant. Amira's breath grew shallow. She scrolled further, pulled up the room assignment history, and her suspicions were confirmed. Her suite had been reassigned, not just to anyone, but to the very couple Tiffany had just escorted upstairs. A VIP suite, the one Amira had specifically booked for quality testing. Her room, her property, her name was on the deed. Yet someone else was enjoying turn-down service and champagne on her pillow. Just then, a maintenance worker passed by and gave Amira a quick nod, clearly recognizing her. He slowed as if to say something, but hesitated, eyeing the front desk. That's when it clicked. Tiffany hadn't just erased a booking. She'd been erasing people. Quietly, strategically, with the kind of confidence that only grows when management turns a blind eye. Amira's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was systemic. And now, the woman who thought she was invisible was about to become impossible to ignore. Amira didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a scene in the lobby or demand attention. Instead, she quietly stepped away from the front desk and moved toward the administrative wing, her heels clicking steadily against the polished floor. She passed through the executive access door and made her way to the office at the end of the hall, where a silver plaque read, "Brian Thompson, Night Operations Manager." She knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. Brian looked up, startled. Mid-30s, always a little too casual in posture, Brian stood so fast he nearly knocked over his coffee. "Ms. Blake, oh my God, I didn't know you were coming," he stammered, face turning pale. Hope everything's okay." Amira didn't answer right away. She walked in, closed the door gently behind her, and placed her phone on his desk. Screen up, logs still glowing. "This is how one of your front desk agents is representing my brand," she said calmly. Brian's eyes dropped to the screen, and his throat visibly tightened. I didn't realize," he began, but Amira held up a hand. "Don't," she said, her tone steady. "You knew. You received at least 4 guest complaints about Tiffany in the last month alone. One from a pregnant woman who was told she didn't look like a VIP. Another from a retired professor who was left waiting in the lobby for 2 hours while others were checked in ahead of him. And let's not forget the international couple who never got their reservation back after being accidentally removed from the system." Brian shifted uncomfortably, trying to avoid her gaze. "I thought maybe it was just training issues," he muttered. "She's been here for a while. She knows the system inside out." I didn't think she meant any harm. Amira gave him a long, pointed look. Brian, you had a paper trail of complaints and a pattern of behavior so obvious it practically screamed liability. And still, you left her at the front desk, representing our highest-end location, during a week when we're hosting 3 major conferences and welcoming guests from all over the world. Brian swallowed hard. I didn't want to rock the boat, he admitted, eyes cast downward. She's loud, pushy. The rest of the team avoids conflict. I figured maybe if we gave it more time. Amira exhaled sharply. You figured wrong, she cut in. You're in charge of this property's culture at night, and you allowed discrimination to fester under your nose. That's not passive neglect. That's active failure. She turned the phone screen toward him again. Do you know what else I found in the system? Tiffany personally reassigned my suite, the one I booked anonymously for a quality control audit, to a different guest. She didn't just cancel a booking, she made a decision based on who she thought mattered and who didn't. And you empowered her to make that call. Brian looked like he wanted to disappear into his office chair. Ms. Blake, I'm truly sorry. I'll speak to her first thing in the morning. Amira narrowed her eyes. No, Brian, you won't. She stepped closer, voice calm but cold. Because I'm handling it. Personally, right now. Amira stepped back into the lobby with purpose, her heels tapping a steady rhythm across the polished floor. The space buzzed with activity, conference attendees mingling near the espresso bar, a group of journalists gathered near the windows preparing for the hospitality tech panel later that evening, and hotel staff weaving between guests with carefully trained smiles. No one noticed her at first, but as she approached the front desk again, the energy in the room began to shift. She didn't raise her voice, but her presence alone pulled attention. Standing directly in front of Tiffany, who was now busy tapping away on the computer as if nothing had happened, Amira's voice rang out, calm but unmistakably clear. I need clarification, she said, loud enough for half the lobby to hear. Did you or did you not delete a reservation under the name Amira Blake? Tiffany's hands froze mid-keystroke. She looked up, blinking rapidly as her face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. I don't remember seeing that name. Amira didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly removed her sunglasses, revealing a cool, focused stare. That's surprising, she said, because that name should have stood out. I'm the one who signed the 40-year lease agreement for this building. I'm the CEO of Aurora Lux Hospitality, the brand on every piece of stationery in this hotel. And you, she paused, letting the silence land like a hammer, just deleted the owner's reservation without a second glance. There was an audible gasp from somewhere in the lounge. One of the reporters dropped her notebook. Several guests stopped mid-conversation, even the bellhop by the elevator froze, his mouth slightly open. Tiffany's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to speak, but no words came out. Her entire body stiffened as the realization slammed into her. She hadn't just been rude to another pregnant black woman. She'd dismissed, disrespected, and actively sabotaged the very person whose name appeared on her pay stub. Amira didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her voice remained even, her gaze unwavering. Let me explain what happens next, she said, still addressing Tiffany, but allowing the rest of the lobby to listen in. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination in any form, whether that's based on race, gender, appearance, or assumptions about who belongs. That policy includes immediate consequences for any staff member who compromises our standards. Tiffany's fingers twitched, her mouth trembling. I didn't know, I swear, she managed to whisper. Amira tilted her head slightly, expression unreadable. That's exactly the problem, she replied. You didn't know who I was, so you assumed I didn't matter. By now, a crowd had quietly gathered near the front desk, watching, phones discreetly raised. The lobby, just minutes ago filled with casual chatter, now felt like the floor of a courtroom. Amira glanced briefly at the nearest security camera, fully aware the footage was capturing every second. What you did wasn't just a mistake, she added. It was a choice. One you've made before, and one you won't make again. At least not here. Tiffany stood completely still, visibly shaking, while Amira turned her back and walked toward the center of the lobby. She didn't need to shout. The truth had already been exposed, and now everyone in that hotel knew exactly who she was. Brian arrived at the front desk moments later, his face pale and damp with sweat as he stepped into the center of the now silent lobby. Guests were still gathered nearby, watching the scene unfold like a real-time business ethics case study. Amira didn't need to say much, just a quiet nod toward Tiffany was enough. Brian cleared his throat, trying to maintain composure, but his voice cracked slightly as he turned to his employee. Tiffany Grant, he began, due to multiple verified violations of Aurora Lux Hospitality's professional conduct standards and the damage your actions have caused to both our guests and our brand reputation, your employment is terminated effective immediately. A hush fell over the room. Tiffany's eyes widened, her jaw slack. Wait, what? You can't be serious. I didn't mean to. This is a huge misunderstanding, she pleaded, looking from Brian to Amira with growing desperation. You have to let me explain. But it was too late. The system logs didn't lie, and her pattern of misconduct was undeniable. Amira remained calm, arms crossed, unwavering. This isn't just about me, she said firmly, addressing the room as much as Tiffany. This is about every guest who's ever walked into this building and been treated as if they didn't belong. About every complaint that got buried. Every silent moment when someone in uniform chose to look the other way. She turned to face the rest of the staff, front desk clerks, concierge team, bellhops, even the cafe barista peeking out from behind the espresso machine. We don't just sell rooms, she continued. We sell trust, safety, dignity. And if anyone in this building doesn't understand that, if you think hospitality is about picking and choosing who's worthy of respect, you don't belong in this company. Her words echoed across the lobby, heavy and deliberate. No one spoke. A few employees nodded subtly. Others looked down, avoiding her gaze. Brian glanced at Tiffany, who was now visibly shaking, her protests reduced to quiet disbelief. Security approached gently from the side, waiting for the cue. Amira gave a small nod. Tiffany turned one last time, glaring, not at Amira, but at the situation, at the consequences, at the mirror being held up to her actions. She grabbed her purse with shaky hands and without another word, walked toward the exit as the entire lobby watched in silence. Amira didn't gloat. She didn't smile. Instead, she turned back to her staff, her voice lower but no less resolute. Let this be the moment everything changes, not just here, but across every Aurora Lux hotel. From today forward, the standard is non-negotiable. Excellence in service begins with humanity. And just like that, the tone of the entire space shifted, not with fanfare, but with the unmistakable presence of leadership reclaiming its ground. The clip was barely 40 seconds long, but within hours it had racked up over 3.2 million views on social media. The footage, captured by a guest seated near the espresso bar, showed Amira Blake standing calmly at the front desk, one hand resting gently on her belly, the other pointing at the internal system log that proved her reservation had been manually deleted. Tiffany stood frozen, her expression a cocktail of panic and disbelief. And in the background, the entire lobby was watching in stunned silence as the truth unfolded. The caption beneath the video read simply, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard." That moment, poised, quiet, undeniable, spread like wildfire. Comments poured in from across the country, applauding Amira not just for revealing the truth, but for the way she did it. Without yelling, without spectacle, just unwavering composure and facts. Because discrimination doesn't always come with slurs or raised voices. Sometimes it hides in subtle choices. Who gets a smile, who gets ignored, whose ID is triple-checked, and who's told, there must be a mistake. Sometimes it looks like a desk clerk scrolling past a reservation she doesn't want to honor. And too often it goes unchecked because the target doesn't have the power to fight back. But Amira did. And she used it. Not to punish, but to correct. She didn't walk into that hotel looking for revenge. She walked in looking for accountability. What she found was a deeply embedded culture of quiet exclusion. And what she left behind was a wake-up call. Not just for Tiffany, not just for Brian, but for every employee in that lobby and every leader watching the video online. She didn't take the bait when she was dismissed. She didn't lash out when she was humiliated. Instead, she made the system speak for itself. and made sure everyone was listening. The power of that moment wasn't in her title or her wealth. It was in her clarity, in her refusal to let silence be mistaken for weakness. Amira reminded us all that leadership isn't about asserting dominance. It's about setting a tone and holding people to it. And perhaps most importantly, she reminded us that respect is not a luxury amenity. It's the bare minimum. That in every lobby, every waiting room, every place where a person stands wondering if they're being seen or judged or ignored, there's an opportunity to do better, to look again, to listen, and to understand that sometimes the person you're dismissing is the one who built the very walls around you. Amira didn't just reclaim her room, she reclaimed the narrative. And in doing so, she changed the standard for what hospitality and leadership should look like. If this story moved you, if you believe that respect should never be determined by appearance, status, or assumption, then help us spread that message. Like this video if you believe quiet strength is louder than any scream. Comment below, have you ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated? And don't forget to subscribe to X Daily Stories for more powerful, real-life inspired stories that challenge injustice, celebrate dignity, and remind us that one voice, spoken calmly but boldly, can change everything. Because the world doesn't just need louder voices, it needs stronger ones.